Welcome to The Next Level, conversations that propel business. The next hour is all about the entrepreneur, why they start businesses, how they make their businesses grow, how they overcome failures and achieve success. Your hosts are Bob Gibbons, founder of Riata Commercial Realty, a commercial real estate advisory and tenant advocacy firm, and Stephen Nooner, founder and CEO of Alkali, a company with a unique process that helps businesses more effectively buy and manage their insurance programs. Bob and Stephen will ask probing questions to find impactful solutions that will help take your business to the next level. And now, here's Bob Gibbons and Stephen Nooner.
Welcome to The Next Level, conversations that propel business. This is your host, Bob Gibbons.
And this is your other host, Stephen Nooner. Are we doing okay, Bob?
I'm on track. Go ahead.
Perfect. I'm really excited. I get to introduce Brian Fisher. Brian Fisher is president of Human Coalition, a very entrepreneurial and innovative nonprofit whose mission is to rescue babies and families from abortion. Human Coalition currently employs 110 people in 11 locations with about 50 of them here in Dallas. If you want to learn more about Brian or Human Coalition, please visit humancoalition.org.
Welcome, Brian.
Great. Nice to be here. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Sure. Well, we're going to throw out a little disclaimer here right up to the front. A lot of our listeners, as you know, are not going to agree with the positions and views that you're going to be talking about this the next hour. So we recognize that. Our listeners, we're sensitive to that, but at the same time, we find that the organization is doing some interesting things that our business listeners can probably learn from, different ways of, quote, marketing the services and that kind of thing. So we felt like it was a relevant conversation to have on a business show. So whether you agree or disagree, listen for that, and also be listening for the why. And I think it's really important that we have conversations with people that we disagree with at times, because you know what? How are we going to learn if we don't talk to people that we disagree with on any subject, not just this one? So
that's the only reason I'm here. I disagree with Bob on pretty much
almost
everything he says.
Everything.
I know, but seriously, I mean, we the vision for our show, we want to facilitate meaningful conversations where we're all challenged and have the opportunity to grow. And so I think that just comes into listening with an open mind and have the opportunity from there. So I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks.
So the thing I thought was interesting first, we asked you some things about yourself that most people don't know, and one of them was that you love aquariums, a little weird, and that you've sung the national anthem at a Major League Baseball game. Yeah. Tell me about that. Was an aquarium present?
No, they're two separate hobbies.
It's for the Marlins.
Okay.
It's for the Marlins.
Yeah. No, I graduated with a music degree, so music was my life up until my early 20s. And when I graduated from school, I realized that musical talent and gainful employment weren't necessarily connected. So got a job.
Was it voice?
No, it was piano, classical piano,
okay.
but I did sing.
Wow.
So I was part of a group and I had a band and the whole deal, and somebody had a connection into the Pittsburgh Pirates, and so we got tapped to the four of us to sing the national anthem at a game in the old Three Rivers Stadium. It was quite a rush.
Now I've been in the new stadium.
Park,
that's an awesome park where it's cut away in the outfield and you can see downtown across the river.
Yeah, Three Rivers was not like that.
No, it wasn't.
No. It was not awesome.
It's kind of like the old Rangers stadium here in Dallas. That was awful.
Yeah,
really awful. But the new one's great.
So one thing that we like to do is start off with wisdom of others, and I thought you had a great quote here.
Sorry, I kind of jumped ahead, didn't I?
I mean, Bob has just been chomping at the bit to talk about his great experience at Three Rivers.
That's right.
Yes, but you had a quote. It says, "There are three stages in every act of God: impossible, difficult, and done." Why is that important to you?
When we consider an abortion genocide in our culture, we've killed 60 million children through abortion. It is, I think, the most emotionally charged, politicized, polarizing topic in our culture today. And so when we talk about ending the practice, it immediately brings up all sorts of perspectives from all sorts of people.
Sure.
And to most people, even people who would say I'm pro-life, to think about ending abortion in America is impossible. And I would have said that 10 years ago as well. Fast forward to today, I would say it is no longer impossible. It is very difficult. We're in that second stage, but both from a data perspective and just from a success perspective, we would say, hey, look, this doesn't have to be the case. There are other ways to protect humanity and women and children, and we will eventually see abortion ended. The mission statement of Human Coalition is to make abortion unthinkable and unavailable in our lifetime, and I do think it's entirely possible. It requires an act of God because it is so huge that he has to be the centerpiece of it, but that's the hope that we have.
So when you think of mission vision, just like, are you thinking contextually, like, I mean, obviously probably globally, but I mean, what is the vision for Human Coalition? Like when you're thinking of it, are you thinking globally?
We have been domestic of late, the last 8 or 10 years, really since the organization got started. The international conversation has begun because of some of the successes we've had here in the States. But our heart has always been to end it in America first, and then lead the world. It's a worldwide, epidemic. There are supposedly somewhere between 44 and 50 million abortions a year worldwide. So it's the leading cause of death in the world. And so it has to be addressed internationally. But I think America can lead in that. And so if we model it here, that should have a great impact.
So let me ask you a couple of things. In what you started to say in response to the quote, you used the word genocide, and you also invoked God a lot. So doing those two things it almost feels like it's going to stop the conversation almost immediately with a huge population, not only of the world, but certainly of our own country, because that language kind of seems so inflammatory from the very beginning that, I mean, does that not do that? Does it not stop the conversation whenever that's kind of the way it's approached?
Sometimes. I mean, I sort of have a funny joke that I play when I'm in company that I haven't met before, and I inevitably get the question, hey, what do you do?
Yeah.
And so there's about 100 ways I can answer it, but if I'm feeling particularly sarcastic, I say, well, I work to protect women and children from abortion. So immediately, either the person will say, well, that's awesome, I'd like to hear more, or they'll flee as fast as they can from the conversation. Not necessarily. The reality is that we talk about, it's polite not to talk about religion and politics, but those are two things that influence every person on the planet. So the reality is nobody really abides by that. We talk about religion and politics all the time.
Yep.
And so to talk about God and religion and our faith in light of our business, in light of our humanity, in light of social issues is really comes quite naturally to most people. Where you get into difficulty is with people that have a very strong, passionate perspective, usually based on human experience, on their own personal story, and then it has to be treated with grace, gentleness, and respect.
But I guess where I was going with that was not so much whether or not you're talking about religion or politics, but when you start talking about God, and especially Christ and Jesus and that kind of thing, now you're in the Christian realm, and there's so many people that are not. And so it seems like if your mission statement is to eradicate abortion totally, that you're going to have so many allies in so many other camps that have nothing to do with Christianity. So would that not be more, I don't know what the right word is or what I'm trying to say here, but is that not a tact that should be considered?
Well, the reality is the pro-life ethic, the apologetics are deeply rooted in Christianity and are not really rooted in any other worldview. So it's not so much do we need to sort of appeal to folks who are pro-life but are not Christian. It's really, can we get the people that are Christian to actually do something about it? That's the trick. That doesn't mean that we alienate folks. I mean, there are pro-life atheists, there are pro-life Muslims, there are pro-life agnostics, and we do affiliate and work with those groups. They are a staggering minority of the people in the country that would say, I'm pro-life. You can't really separate pro-life from Christ, and the reason is ultimately somebody who's pro-life says we're valuable, and we're valuable because somebody else assigned value to us that isn't human.
Mm-hmm.
And if you try to argue pro-life without a divine being, your apologetics falls apart. So that's why the Christian faith, the biblical perspective, and the pro-life are intertwined. Again, we welcome folks that are pro-life that are not Christian, but ultimately the ethic and the belief system are tied together.
So before we get into Human Coalition, I thought it was interesting also that it's not your first business.
Yeah, and it might be my last based on how things are going.
Tell us real quick. I just thought that it seemed like there was a pretty good story here about Go Fish Music.
Yeah. Oh gosh, you had to bring that up.
Was that related to the game Go Fish?
No. My last name's Fisher. I thought it was clever. I was in my
okay.
early 20s when you think you're clever. I no longer find myself clever at all. Like I said, I was a music major, but I got into the business world pretty quickly. I spent some time in radio and then was recruited into the stocks and bonds business. So most of my early career was in the securities world.
Okay.
And I was privileged to be a part of a startup organization that then grew and was successful and was sold off to a large international banking company. And that was a blast. When I finished that, I started. I've sort of had the entrepreneurial bug throughout my life. So when I was a musician, I started Go Fish Music. I thought we could deliver. At the time, it was very novel. Songs via MP3 download to computers. And this is back in the 90s.
Wow.
But had no capital and no real experience. So it was a great idea that spent a year failing. And I actually got a letter from a professor that I had sent my business plan to, which I still keep, and I have it framed, that basically said this is one of the dumbest ideas I've ever seen. Apple apparently disagreed, and they've done quite well with it. So go figure.
So they stole your idea?
No. We were working concurrently, and I give them all the credit in the world. And then I started a financial planning company for a while, and that was a great experience. But the reality is Human Coalition has by far been the most successful entrepreneurial venture that I've been involved with, and I think it has much less to do with me than it does the amount of hurt and pain that exists in our culture, and there's a need for what we do, and that is what's been driving its success.
So how did it get started? What was the impetus for starting the organization?
The impetus was in 2007, 11 years ago, we discovered that there's about 1.8 million internet searches a month in the United States for abortion procurement terms, like abortion clinic Dallas. Somebody goes on to Google and they search that. 1.85 million searches is a pretty big search volume.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought, well, gosh, these women who are high at risk to abort their children, really what they need is hope and somebody to walk alongside them and provide them legitimate care for them and their baby. So let's see if we could talk to them. And so we started an initiative online to reach these women and give them the option to talk to a different voice, a voice that would encourage them that they can be a great mom and that there's people that will help them take care of herself and her child. And that idea in 2007 morphed into a volunteer nonprofit in 2009 that I started here in Texas. In 2012, 3 of us became the first full-time employees, and we'll close the year as the largest pro-life organization in the country.
Interesting. All right, we got to take a break. We'll be right back on the other side to learn more.
Stick around.
Hi, this is Bob Gibbons with Riata Commercial Realty. If your office lease is going to be expiring in the next year or two, the one thing I would tell you definitely do not want to do is exercise a renewal option. Now, that may sound a little nuts. When you negotiate for that renewal option, why wouldn't you actually want to use it? Well, the reason is because while you want to have one as a reservation for your space so the landlord can't lease the space out from under you, that option may not actually work the way you want it to now. It may have made sense 5 years ago, but it doesn't today. The only thing that changes when you exercise a renewal option are the expiration date and the rent. But you may want to do other things like have another option to renew, have an option to terminate or expand. You may want to be able to expand now or have a new base year for your operating expenses. There's all kinds of things that need to be considered. So we recommend that you renegotiate, not renew. For more information, contact me, Bob Gibbons, at TexasTenantRep.com. That's TexasTenantRep.com.
We're back. This is The Next Level, and we are with Brian Fisher of Human Coalition. If you want to learn more, please visit humancoalition.org.
So just before the break, you were telling us just the sort of the beginnings of the organization and how it got started. You said there were 3 founders. So keep telling us a little more about that and how it started in all the clicks and online searches.
It's a great story. So in 2007, we started testing the idea of reaching women online. In 2009, I quite frankly very begrudgingly started it as an organization. I'm a business guy at heart. I like the nonprofit world, but truth be told, I like the business world better, and so I was not all that excited to start a nonprofit. There's a lot of good profits in the pro-life space, and I really didn't see the reason to start another one, but did. And then God brought a gentleman named Jeff Bradford into my life, who has become a dear friend. He is post-abortive. He and his wife made the decision 20-some years ago to abort their first daughter. and had suffered in silence for decades. And around the time that he and I met, he and his wife were dealing with that issue in a very profound, frankly painful way. But God called him into this work mainly because of his very powerful story. Then a friend of mine from Pittsburgh who I had worked in finance with, a kind of a high technology Carnegie Mellon grad, really super high-end IQ, called me up and said, I want to come down and help you with this effort. And I said, we got no jobs, we got no money, but if you want to move your wife and 7 kids down and give it a whirl, let's go. And he did.
Wow.
And he and Amy and their 7 children moved from Pittsburgh to Dallas. And so the 3 of us, with really whatever money we had in our savings account, started Human Coalition as a side project. And it bumbled along, and we were sort of testing new ideas. We're business guys, so it's all about innovation and testing and optimization. And then in 2011, Texas family heard about us, and we're looking for an innovative, technology-based pro-life organization to get behind, and they gave us a rather large starter grant to convert us from a volunteer organization to a full-time group. And since some of my background is in fundraising and marketing, we quickly began to spread the word. And
so what is Texas Family? I'm not familiar with that organization.
A Texas family.
Oh, Texas family.
An oil and gas family that was just a very generous family that likes sort of startups, innovative projects, and they heard about us and funded us.
Gotcha.
So other not-for-profits you mentioned existed in the space. Mm-hmm. So what was it that was innovative versus what else was being done at the time?
Well, you guys have both worked with nonprofits. It's a very different space than the for-profit world. We underpay our people, and we're not usually the first to adopt new technology. We tend to lag, and we don't have P&Ls. We don't think in terms of benchmarking and performance metrics, and we do. I mean, that was all of our background. The 3 guys that all started it. You're talking about heavy business backgrounds, high accountability situations. Me in the securities world, the marketing world, the high technology space. And so we come and we build a business plan. Wow, you guys got a business plan. And we're using the newest technology. We're using smartphone technology and search engine marketing. And then we're building a platform on Salesforce, which is almost unheard of at that time was unheard of in the nonprofit space. And the business-minded donor has a very high IQ for results and ROI. Mm-hmm. And we were able to say, here's how much it costs us to reach a woman. Here's how much it costs us to speak with her. Here's how much it costs us to save a child. Here's our scalability model. Here's our efficiency metrics. And the donors are just saying, who are you guys? Like, we've never heard of this in the nonprofit space. And so our strongest community of donors is by far the business community, business owners and business executives who are very concerned about stewardship of their dollars. And to have a platform that they can say, I know exactly what my money is going to do, exactly how many lives it's going to save, exactly how many hearts it's going to touch. And they see the innovation in the 6 different components of the work we do has been great. And we're with them. We get it. We understand their struggles as business people because we have them. I'd love to have other additional revenue sources besides donor market, but you don't have that in the nonprofit space. And so they understand our pain, we understand their pain, and it provides for a great synergy.
So I know a lot of other nonprofits are heading in that same direction, and I've heard that even like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they're so data-driven and focused on that. And it seems to be that's why they're getting the money from Warren Buffett and from a lot of other people in I can't remember what the pledge is that they have, but where people pledge to give away 90% of their income or of their net worth before they die. So when a prospective donor is looking at various nonprofits that they are going to invest in, what are the metrics that they should be considering in evaluating one versus another?
Well, it depends on the space. In our world, we have, cost to save a baby, cost to reach a woman. We have internal KPIs for each of our departments. We work off a quarterly goal system. Those quarterly goals are reported on at least once a month. It just depends on what the donor's impact wants to be. In our world, it's fairly easy. We're saving lives. So that is the primary metric that most of our donors are concerned about. So that is, speed to next child, cost to save the baby, the internal performance metrics that regulate that cost. And those are the things that they relate to. In the feeding world, cost to feed a family. In the water world, cost to build a well. Those are things that are deeply important to donors. And we see donors sort of moving away, not away, but not as enthralled by sort of just the stories and just the emotional impact. Those things are very important. People give the vision, we give emotionally. But to the business owner, they have concerns beyond the story. They are concerned about that issue of stewardship and return on dollar. And I think more nonprofits are moving in that world because it is becoming difficult to raise funds. And frankly, is a curse word in the nonprofit space, but it's competitive.
Yeah.
And you have to outcompete for the donor dollar. It's just part of our world.
How impactful is the new tax law that limits donations going to be? The tax deductibility of donations.
Yeah, we'll find out next year. I don't know. In our world, we have thousands of donors of different shapes and sizes, which is great. So we have a fairly diversified donor base. So for the awesome donor who gives $50 a month, it's not going to change at all. For the major donor that gives $1 million a year, it might. And we'll just have to see as that comes down the pike. But every nonprofit is going to deal with that reality.
And circling back to something you said earlier, so, there's 3 of you guys together, and then you basically have the family that steps in and gives you the initial grant. Walk us through, because I think everyone, no matter where they stand on the subject, like there's some key learnings that had to have happened when you have something like that and you're trying to scale up a business.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges that you face with that kind of? It's basically you got funded. And to someone else that's in a VC world or whatever, right? You got funded. So
yeah, it's an angel investor.
Yeah, angel investor. So what were some of the challenges you experienced early on with that?
Well, we approached the whole business planning model differently than many nonprofits. We set aside money in the ask to raise more money. And our pitch is basically, unless you want us to keep coming back to you every year for the next 20 years, we need to build a donor base. And so we need to invest in building a donor base. That's not how many nonprofits think. They sort of think, well, it'll just sort of come. If you build it, they will come. That's not actually the way that it works most of the time. And we also agreed with that initial donor to have flexibility in the plan. So within 60 days of going full time, we discovered the business plan's architecture was shot. Like there were assumptions in the original plan that were wrong. And we didn't know that until we started collecting data that we hadn't been able to collect before. So we went back to the donor and we said, hey, thanks for giving us, a few $1 million. Do you mind if we change the scope of the plan? And, they said yes. And we've had those, the organization is radically different now than what it was intended to be. And welcome to business. That's the way that life is.
Sure.
The major donors, the major institutions, foundations, churches that have donated to us over the years sort of understand that in our space, in the pro-life space, if you don't innovate, you die. And so everything has to be questioned on a regular basis in order to remain relevant and in order to serve the woman and her child well. And the game is always changing. The internet game is changing. The media is always changing. The way we care for a woman and her baby is changing. And so you have to set the expectation up front that you can be adaptable.
What about political forces, too? I got to imagine there's a pretty radical, swings there, too. Does that impact?
Greatly.
Yeah.
Yeah, greatly. Because
it impacts the way you spend the money?
It does, as well as what our business planning is for that cycle. So abortion has become highly politicized. It is not a political issue. It is a moral, spiritual issue with political ramifications. But we have made it so politicized that we are deeply influenced by political forces.
So whenever you started the organization, the 3 of you were just living on savings.
Yeah.
And how many years was that you did that? Like 4 years?
That was 2012. Well, we were all employed. We started the organization in 2009, and we all had jobs.
Okay.
By 2012, we all left our jobs and started full time with Human Coalition, and it was funded. We originally invested our own money as the volunteer organization just to keep it going. At one point, we had $7,000 in the bank, and we're a month away from calling it quits because we were all spent out, and that's when things started rolling, and away we went.
So
just in time delivery.
Just in time.
So whenever you're talking about the money that you raised, and a portion of that has to be set aside to raise more money, I agree with you that most nonprofits don't think in those terms because donors think, well, they want that touchy-feely, right, where, my money did this specific thing, and that specific thing can't be paying somebody to go ask somebody else for money. And yet that's the reality. It's got to, it's like sales. Every organization has to have sales in one way or another.
Right.
So are there metrics within the nonprofit world that says, X% of my dollar
Yeah.
donated should go to the actual, purpose, mission versus overhead, et cetera.
Yes. The business donor accepts that as reality. So we have no problem with business donors, and because, like you said, every business on the planet has a sales department, and everybody understands you have to invest in that. The business-minded donor understands it. There's typically 3 major metrics that charity rating services use: program, operations, and fundraising.
Okay.
And those are the 3 major categories, and we have to report those numbers in our government documents every year. I frankly don't like them. Because I think they're disingenuous. They cause a perception. If one organization has to spend 20 cents on every dollar to raise a buck, and another organization has to spend 5 cents, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a fair comparison of the organization or the vertical that they're in. I think there's better metrics to look at.
Or the impact or ROI.
All right, we'll be right back. You're listening to The Next Level on 1190 AM.
Stick around.
Hi, my name is Fern, and I've been an empowered team member at Alkali for over 5 years. I first learned about Alkali through an online job board and was intrigued to learn that Alkali was a Dave Ramsey endorsed local provider. But what captivated me was Alkali's mission statement, which is closely aligned with my own beliefs. So what's kept me at Alkali for over 5 years? First, Alkali's 5 core values match my own. Second, I've been empowered to use my unique abilities to impact our community, our clients, and Alkali. If you'd like to learn more about becoming an empowered Alkali team member, visit our website, alkaliservices.com. That's ALKALI services.com.
We're back with The Next Level with Brian Fisher, Human Coalition. If you want to learn more, please visit humancoalition.org.
All right, Brian, I want to go back to what you started to say at the beginning, which was, the whole idea was using Google search terms and somebody searching on the internet to try and find another alternative to actually having an abortion. Well, if a woman's looking specifically for an abortion and she's, that's what she's headed toward, what can you do? What is she searching for that is going to say, hey, I had to go click on your site than somebody else's site? How do you reach that person and turn their intentions?
It's establishing a conversation that she wants to have. The entire process of saving children, and by God's grace, we've rescued over 8,600 children from the highest risk abortion situations in the country, is based on building hope and trust with that woman, with the mom, and sometimes with the dad or with another relative. So initially that starts by basically saying, hey, you want to have a conversation about abortion? Let's have the conversation about abortion. And we have a call center that we operate here in Plano that works with women all over the country every day who are at high risk to abort. And that conversation is very pivotal. And we're like, look, we're not going to provide you an abortion. We're not going to refer you for an abortion. We're not going to give you the abortion pill. But we can provide you hope. We can provide you very tangible help. We can provide you information, which you're not going to get anywhere else, so that the decision that you make is legitimately informed. And that's critical, because we've now worked with tens and tens of thousands of women who have been high risk to abort, and the vast majority of them do not understand what abortion is and the long-term ramifications, obviously to the child, but also to themselves and to their family. And so our job is to empower them and to provide them legitimate education and information, and to provide them, quite frankly, a security net. We will walk with them and address issues like them being abused, or them needing drug and alcohol counseling, or the fact that they may not have a job. We'll help them find a job. We'll help them get job training. We'll provide them access and advocacy at the government level so that they can get government services. I mean, we step in and pledge to work with them if they want us beyond the first a couple appointments, and to actually help remove the stressors in their life that are pressuring them to abort in the first place. And so by offering to walk alongside them in a non-judgmental way and provide tangible help, provides hope in a trusted environment. And that is ultimately what rescues the child from abortion. I think we think that, abortion is about the 17-year-old activist who wears a vagina on her head at a march. That's not the abortion-determined community. It is women who, by and large, are neglected, abused, hurt, rejected by family members, and usually by the guy that got her pregnant, and doesn't know what to do, and is taking the only route that she knows is is in her mind going to solve the problem.
So it's a fear-based decision.
It is an anxiety-based decision without question. And when you provide an environment of calm and support and stability, she has a very high likelihood of choosing life. And quite frankly, it goes on to be a rock star, awesome mom.
So this morning I searched just abortion, just the one word, not anything beyond that, just that one word. I didn't see anything like Human Coalition come up that I could directly connect it to. And I went to like the third page.
Yep.
So what terms are they actually searching that would actually have them find you?
It just depends on the market. We've discovered that abortion as a general term usually isn't that effective because you got thousands of people searching for the term for information or politics or whatnot. You need to identify what terms a woman is searching for who is actually looking for an abortion clinic. And that varies by market, by area of the country, sometimes by time of day.
Really?
But certainly somebody who's searching for RU486, which is the abortion pill, that's a good candidate for us, right? So we're going to try to match terms with somebody who is specifically looking for a product. But it can vary widely, and it changes. We do not operate the internet piece at all like we did even 5 years ago.
Interesting. So I wouldn't. Well, let me ask you this: in y'all's plan, are you eliminating abortion of every kind for any reason, rape, incest, et cetera, or is it are there carve-outs?
Well, the carve-out that most Protestants would agree to is when the life of the mother is legitimately threatened, which is, in America, is extraordinarily rare. And in that case, we would say there's even a moral distinction between a typical abortion and performing a procedure on a woman to save her life. But otherwise, no. The child, if we subscribe to the belief or the fact that we are valuable because we're human, and so the zygote is as valuable as the teenager, and that's the essence of the pro-life view, then even those difficult circumstances of conception, which are very difficult, do not devalue the child. They require us to care for mom and family more and child. Let's design a solution where everybody wins and where the child does not suffer the death penalty because of somebody else's crime, right? And that's where it gets into a very interesting political discussion. But we have lots of friends in the pro-life movement who themselves were victims or were products of rape, and they would say, hey, I'm sure glad my mom chose life because I'm here today, even though the circumstances of me coming to existence were awful and were tragic. You know, God does great work through tragedy all the time.
All the time.
All the time.
So speaking of, so tragedy, so what type of sacrifices, right? Like, in insurance, we're rated, I think, next to car salesmen, like people like rank. Like, I gotta imagine, like, that's nothing compared to being in something that's polarizing on both ends. You're probably loved, hated, but never ignored. What is that taking on for you personally?
I'm not sure we're loved in any case. Hated is probably more. I don't want to make more of it than what it is. This is not the career I would have designed for myself. I'll be honest. I was excited to be in business and finance. I have a background in internet and marketing, and those are really fun industries. This is, the threats and the constant being called out in the press, and my face was plastered on a truck running around downtown Atlanta a few months ago, and I looked like I was 400 pounds, and it was not a pleasant drawing of me. I'm caricatured in the media all the time, misquoted. I was just misquoted in Cosmo and NPR in the same week. On some level, you say, that means we're doing great work, and it means that we're effective because those who celebrate the culture of death are afraid of love and compassion and legitimate help being offered to women, and that's good. On the other hand, I, like anybody else, would prefer to be liked because,
sure,
I have a personality and an ego, and by and large, people that know me like me, and, there's a human element to it of being under constant attack. And sometimes those attacks come from our own side. Not everybody agrees with what we do and how we do it. Not everybody likes the fact that we're growing so fast. Not everybody likes the fact that the largest pro-life organization in the country is only 5 or 6 years old. That's a threat to some people, honestly. It shouldn't be, but it is. Mm-hmm. And so the trick is finding relief and rest somewhere, because it's not like, I'm asked to go on a speaker circuit and like the books I've written are bestsellers. I'm asked to speak usually once and rarely asked back because of the content of the discussion. And, the books I've written, most of them are in my closet at home. So the topic is not ever really going to be that appealing to most people. It's okay, and here's why it's okay. There's a TV monitor above my head at the office that clicks up 20, 25, 30 times a day with the number of babies that have been rescued that day.
Hmm.
So if I ever get down, if I ever get upset or depressed because there is this constant pressure, I turn around and I'm like, I have the privilege of being in an organization that rescues a human being, and we have now met many of those children who otherwise would not be alive. I can handle the shots. It's all good.
You know, one thing I've always thought was interesting is when I look at both ends of the political spectrum, there's what seems to be on the surface anyway, a dichotomy, you know, an inconsistency. So on liberals, they're pro-choice, which, you know, is code for I'm okay with an abortion, and yet they don't want the death penalty for criminals. On the other side, we have the conservatives who don't want to allow abortions because they want to save those lives, but they seem to be okay with the death penalty for criminals. Both of those to me seemed incongruous. What do you agree or disagree, or just sort of off topic? Let's move on.
No, I mean, but we don't run into that as often as you might think. It's more of a political discussion, and it's sort of, you know, frankly, a little bit not to be critical, but it's a little bit esoteric, and it doesn't come up all that often.
Okay.
The reality is that most liberals that I know or interact with are pro-abortion because they have a deep heart and compassion for women. It's not that they're in favor of killing babies, and most of them readily acknowledge that's exactly what abortion is. They just have a very strong passion for women and for women's health, and they believe that this right to have sex with whoever we want to should be a institutionalized right, even if that means that we have to kill somebody to preserve that right. Now, you know, those that represent abortion on the media level, that's a different class. But the normal American who says, gosh, I think I lean more towards pro-choice, is typically there because they don't want to see women suffer. And because, candidly, they've not thought through the implications of that worldview to its logical conclusion. One being that 50% of the 60 million children that we've killed are female. But there's lots of other apologetic pieces to that. So I actually think there's a little bit more common ground than out of the political realm, because my desire to see babies rescued is born of a love for humanity, which most liberals would say, well, I share that, but we just differ on who's human. Okay, well, let's have that discussion.
Right.
Let's talk about the humanity of a child in the womb, and let's see if we can't come closer together on that.
And it seems like the primary difference there is that you believe that life starts at conception, whereas the, quote, pro-choice liberal would believe that it starts at birth.
No, because it's scientific fact. It's not a refutable fact. Medical science tells us that life begins at conception. It has to do with valuation. Most thinking liberals will say, well, no, look, biologically life begins at conception. We just don't value life in the womb the same that we value life outside the womb. Okay, well, let's talk about why that exists. And that really gets to the kernel of the matter. Why does one group devalue life in the womb where another says, well, no, we're valuable because we're human, and that's the only qualification we need to be valuable. That's the essence.
So in 30 seconds, why should a pro-choice supporter support your organization?
We do have pro-choicers support us because they love the idea of extending legitimate compassion and care to hurting women. We have pro-abortion donors who say, look, I don't agree with you that every child should be rescued, but I do agree with the idea that women should be empowered, that they should be educated, and they should be cared for, and that's what you do.
Interesting. All right. We're going to end this segment, go to commercial. We'll be back in a few.
Stick around.
My name's Adam Butorf, and I'm the founder and CEO of Renowned Roofing and Construction. I know the name of the show is The Next Level, so I can only assume the name The Lowest Level was already taken?
Welcome back to The Next Level, Conversations that Propel Business. We're here with Brian Fisher of Human Coalition. You can learn more at humancoalition.org.
So, Brian, we've touched on the intersection of faith with the pro-life movement, right? So I would think naturally that you would have a lot of support from the church. Is that a fair assumption, or is that, I mean?
Well, the vast majority of our donors are Protestant and Catholic.
Okay.
That's for sure the case. Again, because that does make up the majority of the pro-life community. The institution of the church, whether it's Protestant or Catholic, not nearly as much.
Okay. So, and like, I think, and so the question was a little bit leading because I think I saw somewhere some crazy statistic of like the percentage of total donations versus donations to.
Oh, Well, so what most Americans don't realize, if you go to the CDC, they'll tell you that the leading cause of death in America is heart disease. I have heart disease. I almost died 3 years ago from heart disease, so I appreciate the work that's being done there. It kills about 600,000 people a year.
Wow.
And then cancer kills about another 500,000. If you put cancer and heart disease together in America, that adds up to the number of children who are aborted every year. So the leading cause of death in America is not heart disease, it's the killing of our own children by the factor of almost 2. So 1 in 3 deaths every year in America are from abortion. Now think about that. 1 in 3 deaths in America.
That's including natural causes, like 1 in 3 period.
1 in 3 deaths in total in America are caused by an abortion. So we are not talking about some obscure thing. We are talking about a genocide which affects every single American. Every one of us knows somebody or ourselves has had an abortion or are missing somebody in our lives because of abortion. It's statistically accurate to make that claim. The irony is that Americans gave, I think it was $380 billion away in 2016. So we are a very, and that's through all mechanisms and venues and institutional giving, but $380 billion was donated by Americans in 2016. 0.2%.
0.2 of 1%.
0.2 of 1%, $700 million went to ending the leading cause of death in America. Now, $700 million sounds like a lot, but actually it's a throwaway. And the reason is it goes to 4,000 different groups and gets dispersed and in many ways becomes ineffective. So when 20 cents of every $100 goes towards ending the leading cause of death in America, we have to concede that America candidly does not really care about ending abortion yet. Financially, there's very little connection between those two.
Why do you think that is? Because that surprises me, I guess, a little bit in regards to the statistics of that.
Yeah, it's because the institution that houses the pro-life ethic, which is the Christian church, Protestant and Catholic, by and large, is disengaged, if not uninvolved. The pro-life movement was primarily born out of the Catholic Church, and still the majority of the movement is a Catholic-born movement. I'm Protestant, and the Protestant church is beginning to catch up. But if I were to ask your listeners how many of you have heard a sermon or a Sunday school on abortion, which is the worst spiritual issue ever to afflict itself on America and the leading cause of death in America, most of your listeners would say, I've never heard it talked about in my church. Over 50% of Protestant churches are not even pro-life. Doctrinally, they don't actually agree with Scripture that life is sacred and should be protected at all stages. And so when your primary institution, and I mean the institution of the Christian body universal in America, won't talk about it, won't talk about birth control, won't talk about pornography, won't talk about all the causes and abortion itself, then you have an uneducated public, and you'd say, well, why would they give to it when they don't even understand the ramifications of what abortion actually is?
Well, and I've heard a statistic that there's 34,000 different Christian denominations. So, I mean, when Christians can't even get along and figure out what they even believe in, I mean, they can't possibly donate in any kind of cohesive
manner. Yeah, and the denominational thing, I'm probably a contrarian. That doesn't bother me as much as it bothers other people. I sort of, the vast majority of evangelical believers, whether they're Protestant or Catholic, agree on much more than they disagree on. We get really upset about stuff we disagree on, but, we can fight about that, over drinks after dinner. The reality is that a Christian...
Non-alcoholic drinks, is that?
I'm Presbyterian, so I'm fine with it.
Depends, right?
Yeah, Presbyterians are fine with it. I'm of the mindset that the issue isn't the denominational differences. It's a matter of courage and will. 1 in 3 women sitting in churches today have had an abortion. The church has a moral obligation to deal with it because most of those women in some way are suffering. 1 in 3 men sitting in church are the father of at least one aborted child. Why aren't we dealing with an issue that has affected the vast majority of Americans, either directly or indirectly? The church should actually be leading the charge on at least offering healing and hope to those women and men who have had abortions, but I would argue have a moral obligation, a biblical obligation to actually deal with the issue directly.
So I understand there's virtually no difference in divorce rates among Christians versus non-Christians. Is the case with abortions?
It is, yeah. Abortion rate in the church is essentially the same as outside.
So that makes a very difficult challenge for your organization and others that are trying to appeal to the Christian church and the Christians to support you and to sort of get active to end this without having any real will.
Remember I said I wasn't liked by anybody? That's what I was referring to. Yeah, it's getting better and better. Pastors and priests across the country are really beginning to come to grips as they get educated about how abortion is ripping apart the fabric of the American family. So it is improving. But there's this issue of courage, which cannot be understated. It takes courage to step into the fray, even gently, with compassion and winsomely, because it is so politicized and no one really wants to talk about it. It's an issue that everybody is impacted by and nobody wants to discuss.
Okay, so, but let me ask you this. At the beginning of the show, you made a statement that was something along the lines of your goal is to eradicate abortion
unthinkable
totally,
and unavailable.
not only in the United States, but eventually throughout the world.
Right.
Well, just in the United States, based on the numbers you've given to us today, you said that you rescued 2,500 babies in 2017, but there's 3,000 a day that are actually aborted, which means that your effectiveness thus far is 0.2%.
Right.
And that's in your best year so far. So how can you possibly extrapolate that, along with the funding we already talked about, to that kind of an audacious goal?
Well, the good news is in 2011, we rescued 15. So in 2011, we rescued 15 babies. In 2017, we rescued 2,503. So the momentum is certainly working in our favor.
That's awesome.
And yet we come to grips with the fact that we only really rescued 1 day's worth of babies in that entire year. There's a couple reasons why that's actually good news and not challenging news. The reality is every time that a baby is rescued, you're rescuing other babies that you'll never see. The reason is a woman who aborts typically goes very quiet and dark and won't talk about it sometimes for decades. A woman who was going to abort and then through intervention and hope and security chooses life becomes an evangelist for life. So you have this cultural tide. 2,500 babies saved in 1 year means that some multiple of that is being rescued this year that we'll never even touch or know about. And so you're going to see this monsoon of life sweep over the country over the next 5 or 10 years as we grow, because women who are legit, look, the abortion industry basically tells the woman you're stupid, you're incapable of doing anything else, you can't handle this, so take the life of your child. We're coming along, and the life movement is saying, no, no, no. Not only does your child have dignity, you have dignity. You have worth, you have potential, you're capable of some awesome things. Let's just work together to remove the oppressions from your life and set you free to be able to go do those awesome things. It's a much better message. It's a much more hopeful, optimistic message. And oh, by the way, you get to give birth to a divine work of art who is utterly unique in all of human history. I mean, it's a pretty good deal. And the reality is that although we'd say, gosh, we only rescued 1 day's worth of babies, this year we'll rescue more. And as we continue to fund and get and it's still hope in the church, it's going to continue to be a tidal wave, and that's why I think we'll see it ended pretty quick.
So Malcolm Gladwell, tipping point type scenario.
Flywheel.
Yeah. So
Jim Collins, yeah.
So looking forward, so what's the strategy? Like, how do you guys make that impact going forward?
You build the necessary care structure in the 40 most abortion-dense cities in the country, and then you compete with the culture of death in the abortion industry for those women, and love and hope win. That's how you do it. The key is, how do you scale what is a very large infrastructure effectively, and that's a matter of continuing to work with the church and frankly find other creative ways of funding that initiative to be able to grow fast enough to be able to get that done.
So in the material that we asked you to fill out, we asked you about what was one of the biggest breakdowns that turned into a breakthrough. And you were talking about how your call centers only had like a 42% call answer rate or something like that. Tell us about that, and what did you do to solve that?
Well, that wasn't our call center. When we first started working, all we were doing was the internet piece. Today, of course, we're the entire system. We have the internet, we have the call center, we own our own medical clinics, we do a continuum of care program for the client afterwards, and then we work with churches. It's a holistic abortion ending solution. Back then, it was just the internet piece. We discovered that we were sending calls to pro-life agencies, and only 42% of those phone calls we were sending were being answered.
Oh.
Not going to voice, just not answer. 42% answer rate.
So somebody who's calling who has already self-identified as, I need information, I want some help.
That we're not even getting the phone picked up more than half the time. That's why we started the call center. So we didn't want to start a call center. We didn't know anything about running call centers. But today, the answer rate is in the high 90s, and our effectiveness at speaking to that woman and helping her understand what we do so that she'll come in and see us has gone up materially every year. It is the top performing call center in that space in the country.
Interesting. Well, so what's next? What do you see happening in the next year or 2 years? For you personally or the organization?
I'd love to lose about 20 pounds. That'd be awesome. I've been working on that
Look
for
better
15
on that,
years
on
now.
the side of that bus.
Yeah, this is why I'm on radio, not on television. Personally, it's interesting because 5 years ago it was 3 guys. Today it's 115 people. My role has changed dramatically, and it will continue to do so. So the more that I can continue to be forward-looking, to work on expansion, to public speak, to work with churches, is in the best interest of the organization, whereas 5 years ago I was actually doing the internet marketing. So that's how my role will change. I think Human Coalition is reaching a very interesting point in our culture where people are beginning to sort of question their belief system about what abortion is. And I think we're going to see a real interesting tidal wave in the church of people saying, gosh, this is the biggest issue of our day, and we can win. And we win by expressing the love and grace of Christ.
Well, thanks so much for coming in to our show and talking about this. We know it's an uncomfortable conversation for a lot of people to have, and I was a little uncomfortable with it going in, honestly. So I appreciate you doing that. And for our listeners, please go to humancoalition.org to learn more, whether you agree or disagree.
If you know someone who should hear this, help spread the word.
See you next week.
Have a great week.